I just found the note that my boyfriend's ex hid right before she dumped him. My boyfriend and I, let's call him Steve, have been dating for 2 years and officially living together for 8 months. I was cleaning our apartment and was cleaning in the back of the cabinet when I saw a note. Now, I moved into Steve's apartment, so I assumed that this was some old letter that somehow just got shoved to the back of the cabinet and he missed. Yeah, that's not what it was. When I open the letter, it reads, "Dear Steve's future girlfriend, I know you're reading this letter because Steve would never clean back here. I'm leaving him soon and I just wanted to warn you about him. He will not clean, he will not listen, and he will make everything feel like it's your fault. It's not your fault, he's an incompetent man. I'm leaving him and I suggest you should too. Sincerely, Steve's ex-girlfriend." I think in most circumstances, I wouldn't think anything about the note. I would assume it was an ex being petty. But it's been 5 years since they've broken up, and she was right. I was the one who found the note. Steve never cleaned back there. So I immediately bring the note to Steve, who's in the bedroom, and he rips the thing up, starts going on about how she's crazy, untrustworthy, all these things, and I'm like, red flag. Why are you trying to discredit your ex instead of actually talk about the situation? I was like, babe, you're calling her crazy, but she was right. She knew I'd be the one who found the note, and in the 5 years that it's been, you never found it, and guess who did? Me. It also made me realize that when I first moved into Steve's apartment, we would split the chores pretty 50-50. But as the months went on, Steve has been cleaning less and less. I guess I never really noticed it because, I don't know, it's been a really slow progression from he used to do the dishes, then ask me to help with the dishes, and now I'm just doing them. But yeah, he doesn't help clean that much. So he starts getting super angry saying, "This was never a problem. You're just letting my ex-girlfriend get in your head." And I'm like, no, I think this has been a problem. I'm just now realizing it. This was probably the biggest fight we ever had. We just kept arguing about it and could not see eye to eye. And again, he kept making me feel like I was wrong. Kind of like the note said. And then he finally got so fed up that he left our apartment and went to go stay at his friends, which I hate. Okay, leaving when things get hard. Steve has been a great boyfriend to me so far. He gets along with my family. He is really sweet to me and always tells me he loves me. But yeah, the cleaning thing, she's not wrong. And even when I ask Steve to clean, he always just brushes me off. He's like, yeah, I'll get to it later. Until it gets to the point where dishes in the sink are getting moldy, and if I don't do it, it's just disgusting. So I've just stopped asking him. And then when I tried to use the note to start a conversation about the issue, he wouldn't listen to anything I said. He wouldn't listen to any of my valid points. He just kept saying, it's confirmation bias. It's confirmation bias. No, there's actual valid concerns. When he got home the next day, I told him that I wanted to continue the conversation, which he didn't seem very psyched about. I started off by saying that I was sorry for confronting him with the note, which he seemed to take as an admission that I was wrong. And after that, he wouldn't listen to a single point I made. I was trying to say, no. I'm apologizing because I should have brought up these issues before I found this note, not only after I found a note from your ex. I'm not saying that the points I have are wrong. I'm just saying, should have done it sooner. The night before, I had a lot of time to reflect on the situation, because Steve left me alone to just sit with my thoughts. So I actually came up with a list of the things that Steve does not clean around the house that I'm forced to. Silly me, I thought that giving specific examples might help him understand my point, but obviously that was so wrong of me. As soon as I get the list out, he starts huffing and puffing, and he's like, wow, Kelsey, I cannot believe you. You know who else used lists? My manipulative ex. That's who used lists. I was like, okay, I actually think a lot of people use lists because it's a really good way to organize your thoughts. But that's when he starts berating me. He tells me that I'm weak. He says that he can't believe he's in a relationship with such a weak woman that would believe anything she read. I believe it because I see it. It's true. He was telling me I was an idiot, that he was embarrassed for me, that he can't believe that I would act like this. And I was floored. Steve has never talked to me like this before. And that's when I decide, you know what, if Steve can just leave because I'm confronting him with his own reality, then I can leave when he's calling me an idiot. So I start to try to leave, and he blocks the door and tells me the person in the wrong isn't allowed to walk out. He said, I'm not going to spend tonight wondering where you are. You can spend the night wondering where I am. And he storms out. I was like, did you feel like you really made a point with that one? Because I got what I wanted. I just didn't want to be near you anymore. This is the first time I've ever brought up any issue I've had with Steve. And his reaction is more than alarming. I think it's a waving red flag that's telling me, get out now. The issue is I feel completely blindsided by this because Steve has never acted this way before. But I know that there's one person that would understand what I'm going through. That's my boyfriend's ex-girlfriend. I need to talk to her. Get ready with me while I tell you the most insane revenge plan that I've ever heard. My youngest aunt on my mom's side of the family has always been seen to be the disappointment child. She's always the outcast, always the butt of everyone's joke, and is just really different from the rest of her siblings and her parents. Personally, I think she is the coolest person ever and is easily my favorite of all my aunts and uncles. She has a ton of tattoos, a ton of piercings. She taught herself how to play the drums and plays in a band. And she works as a bartender at a local restaurant. So sometimes on weekends, I'll literally just go and sit and hang out with her. Everyone on my mom's side of the family cares a lot about what people think about them. They put a lot of effort into always looking put together and like everything is going super well. But my aunt, she doesn't care what people think about her. She just wants to be 100% herself, and I'm obsessed with that energy. Last year, I was going through a pretty bad breakup, and the only person I felt like I could talk to about it was my aunt. So I asked her if I could come live with her for a few weeks, and she obviously said yes. Again, she's the best. So I asked her for advice about how she would get over heartbreak, and that's when this woman told me the most wild story ever. When I did not think she could become any more iconic, she told me how she handled her first heartbreak. A few years ago, my aunt was dating who she thought was the love of her life. She told me that she was convinced that she was going to marry this man. There was no doubt in her mind. She was completely head over heels in love with him. But that is when she found out that her boyfriend's assistant, Rebecca, she was helping him with more than just his calendar and phone calls, if you know what I mean. My aunt told me that she didn't even know it was possible to feel that heartbroken. But she wasn't eating, she wasn't sleeping. She was just letting herself wither away in bed, which does not seem like my aunt's personality at all. So the thought of her being that down bad over a man, can't even imagine it. But here's the kicker. Only 6 months after the breakup, 6 months, when my aunt is starting to feel better, she's starting to feel like herself again, who waltzes up to her door but Rebecca herself, the little home-wrecking assistant. And she is there to deliver a wedding invitation. That's when my aunt found out from Rebecca that the affair was going on for a lot longer than she thought it was, and Rebecca was pregnant. She told me that she will never forget that sly little smirk that was on Rebecca's face as she handed my aunt one of the wedding invitations and told her she really hopes she could make it. And my aunt knew she was going to that wedding. Because what my aunt knew that neither Rebecca nor my aunt's ex knew, her ex was infertile. Apparently, before the breakup, my aunt and her ex really wanted to have a baby, but they were having trouble getting pregnant. So they decided to go to a fertility specialist where they had a ton of different tests run. But the affair came out and the breakup happened before the results came back. Well, my aunt's test results came back completely normal. Her ex's, infertile, meaning there was no way he was the father of Rebecca's baby. And this is when my aunt starts her plan for revenge, and she knew exactly who she was going to call to help her. Her ex's brother. Apparently they had a very tumultuous relationship, and she always had a feeling he had a little bit of a crush on her. So she gave him a call, told him what was going on, and he immediately said he was willing to help. Before the guests got to where the ceremony was held, they had to go through this walk down memory lane where they walked through this hallway that was filled with pictures of the happy couple. Yet, as the guests walked down further and further, pictures began popping up of Rebecca kissing another man, and then kissing another man, and kissing another man. Yeah, 3 different affairs going on at the same time. That girl was busy. The private investigator that my aunt and her ex's brother hired, he really got the tea on this girl because these pictures, super high quality. And right at the end of memory lane, my aunt taped up her ex's infertility results. Yep, everybody knew that he wasn't the father. Yeah, there was no wedding that day. But there would be one later because that ex-boyfriend, that man's now my uncle, but that's a story for another day. The only way I'll survive is if I avoid somewhere I'm convinced is my home. You've never been here before. I was on my way home from work and everything was completely normal until I got to my apartment building. And that was the sign that I saw glued on the front door. You've never been here before. I thought it was weird, but didn't think much of it. I walked inside and went into my elevator, and there, glued next to the buttons, was another sign. All the floors will feel right. None of them are. I wondered if it was some kind of art project or maybe some teens in the building playing a weird prank. So I pressed the number 7 to go up to my floor, and when the doors opened, right in front of my shoes was another note. It's not too late to turn back. As I passed by the note, I got a really uneasy feeling in my stomach, but I was tired and hungry and just decided to ignore it, deal with it later. I wondered if there were notes on every floor of my building or just mine, but I decided I'd investigate later. I probably would have forgotten about the whole thing, but that's when I opened the front door of my apartment, and there, in the wall directly across from my door, is another note. This is not your home. My body was completely frozen. I knew what that note meant, and it meant that somebody had been inside my apartment to put it there. I slammed my door closed and bolted it and went around the entire apartment looking to see if somebody was in there. I checked in my closet, in the pantry, under my bed, under the couch. I mean, my apartment's not that big. There's not many places someone could hide. Finally, when I determined I was the only one in my apartment, my heart rate began to settle and I started thinking about what happened. I realized that maybe these notes weren't threats, but warnings. I decided that I would go next door and talk to my neighbor to see if he was getting similar notes, but I couldn't shake the feeling that somebody was watching me. So before I exited my apartment, I checked the peephole, and I'm glad I did. At first, the hallway looked completely empty, but slowly I started to see a shadow emerge from the right side of the hallway. The first thing I saw was a man's shoe appear in the front of my door. Then the rest of his body followed. He was a middle-aged man wearing an ill-fitting gray suit that was full of wrinkles. His hair was parted in the middle, and I kept trying to think if I've seen him before, but I couldn't be sure. There's so many people that live in my building that I may have seen him, but just didn't recognize him. I told myself that he was just passing by my door and tried to control my breathing as I looked out the peephole. But that's when he stopped right in front of my door and stared at me. I know it's impossible, but it seemed like he could see me through the peephole. He looked directly at me and waved. Instinctively, I stumbled back, falling to the ground and creating a loud crash, and I sat there quietly. I tried not to breathe because I didn't want to make any more noise than I already had. After a few minutes, I decided to go check to see if the man was still there. I was convinced that when I put my eye to the peephole, his was going to be right there, looking straight back at me. But when I checked, the man was gone. At this point, I knew I needed to call for help. I had no clue what was going on, but I did know that somebody had been in my apartment and I needed help. So I immediately go into my purse to grab my phone, but it's not there. I know I put my phone in my purse. I remember putting it in my purse. I always put it in my purse. At this point, I knew I needed to leave my apartment. I needed to go find help. I needed to talk to somebody about what was going on, but I was terrified. I felt like I was frozen and stuck in that apartment. I couldn't even leave if I wanted to. And that's when I heard a rapid knocking at my door. The knocking outside my door wasn't loud or aggressive. It sounded urgent. Whoever was outside my door was terrified. When I looked out the peephole, I saw a girl that I recognized about my age who lived on my floor. I didn't say anything at first, but she continued to knock. And then she started begging for me to let her in. Because I have talked to her a few times in the past, I reluctantly opened the door just a crack, but she pushed my door completely in, ran inside and slammed the door behind her. When she saw the note that had been hung up in my apartment, she burst into tears and asked me if I got one too. She had no idea what was going on. She said that she also had a note in her apartment and she'd been hiding out there all day. She told me I was the first one she heard come home and she ran right over. She told me that she was looking through her peephole and saw the man outside of my apartment and waited till he went away to come over. Based on the fear in her eyes, I realized that this situation was not just somebody messing with us. This was serious and we needed to get out. I told her it was time to leave. We needed to go downstairs and go get help. And that's when she told me we couldn't. She said there was no way out. I couldn't even comprehend what this girl was saying to me. And she obviously noticed by the look on my face, because that's when she told me, once you're in here, you're stuck. I obviously still looked confused because that's when she continued. She said, do you know who I am? I was like, I mean, we've talked a few times in the hallways, but to be honest, I don't remember your name. I'm so sorry. And that's when she looks at me and she goes, no, you don't know me. We've never met. We've never talked. And I don't live in this building. I started laughing. Like, this situation was getting absolutely ridiculous. Of course I knew her. We've talked. We're neighbors. And that's when she looks at me with the most serious expression and goes, think about it. Is this really your home? I looked around at my apartment. It was sparsely decorated. There were no photos anywhere, no mail, nothing. It looked staged. It looked like nobody had ever lived there. Then I looked at the girl in my apartment. I really looked at her and tried to remember the conversations we had, but I couldn't. I had a feeling that I had met her, but there were no specific memories of meeting her at all. That's when it hit me. I started to try and think of my life, my family, my friends, where I really live, anything, and nothing. My mind was blank. So there I was, standing in an apartment that wasn't mine in complete shock. The girl then asked me my name, which was the only thing I could remember about myself, and she told me that hers was Cassie. I asked her why she came to my apartment. If she has no idea what's going on right now, why would she trust me? I could be anybody. And that's when she told me that she didn't have a choice and asked, should I trust you? And I was like, yeah, honestly, at this point, I'm probably the only person you can trust. I told her that we couldn't hide out forever and we needed to get out of here, figure out a plan, figure out something to do. But I was so tired and weak and I just needed to sit down. So I sat on my couch and she told me that I looked horrible and that I needed to eat something. She said, let's make you something for lunch and then we'll figure out a plan. But I didn't care how weak I was. I knew I needed to get out of there. So without saying anything, I just get up and storm out of my apartment. I immediately go to the elevator and click the button over and over and over again, but nothing happens. Then I decide that I'll try to take the stairs, but when I go there, the door is locked. That's when I hear the elevator ding. I'm thrilled. I think that finally I'm going to be able to get downstairs, but when I go, I see that there's somebody in the elevator. It's the man in the gray suit. Our eyes met, and then he looked behind me at my front door where Cassie was standing. She just started screaming for me to get back inside, and as the man started taking a step towards me, I bolted back into the apartment. At this point, Cassie is absolutely frantic. She's screaming at me, I told you there's no way out. There's no way out of here. And that's when I start hearing a loud banging on my front door. I hear a man's voice who I'm assuming to be the man in the gray suit, and he's just yelling over and over again, it's not too late, it's not too late. At this point, I'm trying to figure out what to do. My eyes are darting between the two exits from my apartment, the front door and the window. And as I'm looking at the window, Cassie says, I mean, you could always jump. And a giant smile spread across her face. I ask her what she's talking about. I'm like, Cassie, what do you mean jump from the window? That is a terrible idea. And that's when she starts to laugh. She sits down on the couch, crosses her legs, and all the fear that was on her face completely disappeared. She looked joyful, almost childlike. That's when she looks me dead in the eyes and says, I asked if you were dangerous, but you never asked if I was. I look at her in complete shock. I'm like, did you leave all those notes? Are you the one who did this? And she said, no. Why would I warn you? That's when the banging on the door got louder and louder before I heard it completely bust in. And before I even had a chance to look, I felt an arm grabbing me, pulling me out my front door and pushing me straight into the elevator. As I looked out the elevator doors from the floor, I saw Cassie standing in my doorway with the biggest smile on her face, laughing. As the elevator doors closed, she said, "Don't be too long. I'll be waiting." That's when I realized that my immediate concern was protecting myself from whoever was in this elevator with me, and I quickly realized it was the man in the gray suit. Immediately, I started fighting back, and he took my shoulders, pinned them down against the floor, and screamed at me that he was trying to help me. He screamed at me. She lured me in too. She lured us all in, and once she makes you eat something, you can never leave again, but it's not too late for you. And then the doors open to the first floor of the building, and he looks at me and tells me to run. But before I go, I asked him his name. It was the one thing I remembered, so I assumed he'd remember too. And he did. I tell the man I can't just leave him there all by himself and just run. But he told me I have to. And he said that she will find a way to lure me back. The first moments leaving that building are completely a blur. I just remember running as fast as I could. And the farther I got away from the building, the more of my real memories started to come back. I remembered my family, my friends, and I remembered where I really lived. When I got home, I spent hours researching the name of the man in the building until I finally found him. He had disappeared 5 years ago on the way to a job interview. As I continued to research the man, I realized that a year prior to his disappearance, he had disappeared another time. He was gone for a few days before he turned up at his parents' house, confused, not knowing what was going on. I can't even imagine what everybody thought. They probably thought that he went crazy or something, but he didn't. And Cassie found a way to lure him back. The man told me that I needed to forget about this place, but how was I supposed to? And I just kept thinking about why Cassie let me leave so easily. If she was able to control my thoughts, my memories, my perception of reality, why did she let me go? But that's when I realized the look of joy on her face. This was all a sick game to her, and she knows that she can lure me in for another round.
তোর কর্মকাণ্ড না আমার কখনোই পছন্দ হয়নি, তারপরও তোর আমি ছেড়ে যেতে পারি না। কেন জানো?
আচ্ছা, আপনি যে স্ট্যামারিং করেন, ডক্টর দেখিয়েছেন?
ডক্টর দেখিয়েছি।
ও মাই গড!
বিদেশ যা, এখান থেকে কিচ্ছু পাবি না, তুই একলা একলা বুঝতেছস?
টেস্টটা
স্বপ্নপুরী।
আনতেছি লালপুর।
I want to kiss your hand, বাবু। বাবা, আমি তোকে পায়ে ধরেছি, বাবা মাফ করে দাও না, ভুল হয়ে গেছে।
রিয়া তোমার প্র্যাকটিস করতে গেছে, তুমি টানা প্র্যাকটিস করে যাইতাছো।
না এখানে দেখি কি হবে।
কানপট্টি লাল করে ফেলবো যদি বেশি থাকো সুখে, বুঝছো? উল্টা পাল্টা যদি কিছু করছো না তুমি বুঝ।
দোস্ত, আমার মনে ইটস দ্য ম্যাজিক।
কি ব্যাপার, এত জোরে তলব?
তোর কি পরিবার নাই? পরিবারের প্রতি মায়া দয়া নাই কোনো? তোর বড় করে নাই তোকে পরিবার? প্রেম করা
আমার ভুল হয়ে গেছে বাবু, আমি তোমার ছাড়া বাঁচবো না বাবু।
আমার বয়ফ্রেন্ড অনেক ভালো, আপনার গার্লফ্রেন্ডের মতো এত খারাপ না।
হ্যাঁ মতিন।
কে?
পুরোটাই তো তোমার দোষ। তুমি কি জন্য ফোন দিচ্ছ সেটা বলো।
বাবু তুমি আমার থেকে 1.5 লাখ টাকা
আমি তোমাকে বিয়ে করতে চাই না।
মানে
আপনার বয়ফ্রেন্ড ফোন দেয় নাই?
না।
তোর কর্মকাণ্ড না আমার কখনোই পছন্দ হয়নি, তারপরও তোর আমি ছেড়ে যেতে পারি না। কেন জানো?
আচ্ছা আপনি যে স্ট্যামারিং করেন ডক্টর দেখিয়েছেন?
ডক্টর দেখিস।
ও মাই গড।
ডেলি রিফ্রেশড।
আই এম ট্রাইং।
তোর এই ট্রাইং দেখে মনে হইতেছে তোর
আমার বয়ফ্রেন্ড অনেক ভালো, আপনার গার্লফ্রেন্ডের মতো এত খারাপ না।
হ্যাঁ মতিন।
কি?
আসলে না আমার মনটা অনেক খারাপ।
চোখ বন্ধ করেন।
আমি বুঝি না ভাই, তুই কি মানে তোর সমস্যা কি? তুই এনে কি করতেছিস? তোর কত সুন্দর একটা
গরিব তো কিছুদিন আগে না ওর চাকরি চলে গেছে, তো বলতেছে দোস্ত আমি তো গরিব মানুষ, আমার
কানপট্টি লাল করে ফেলবো যদি বেশি থাকো সুখে। বুঝছো? উল্টাপাল্টা যদি কিছু করছো না তুমি
আপনি ওনার কাছে ব্যাংক ওয়ালেট এটিএম বুঝছে না।
পিয়া কি তোরে বিয়ে করে লেগে রাজি হয়ে গেছে? অবশ্যই অবশ্যই করবে। আচ্ছা
আপনি ওনার কাছে ব্যাংক ওয়ালেট এটিএম বুঝছে না। গরিব তো কিছুদিন আগে না ওর চাকরি চলে গেছে, তো বলতেছে দোস্ত আমি তো গরিব মানুষ, আমার
তুমি যে বারবার আমাকে ফোন দিচ্ছ, তোমার তো বোঝা উচিত যে আমি কাজে ব্যস্ত থাকি, আমার একটা বিজনেস আছে।
ডেলি রিফ্রেশড।
আই এম ট্রাইং।
তোর এই ট্রাইং দেখে মনে হইতেছে তোর
পুরোটাই তো তোমার দোষ। তুমি কি জন্য ফোন দিচ্ছ সেটা বলো।
বাবু তুমি আমার থেকে 1.5 লাখ টাকা
আমি তোমাকে বিয়ে করতে চাই না।
মানে
আপনার বয়ফ্রেন্ড ফোন দেয় নাই?
না।
রাখেন, কাজে দিবেন।
যান আপনি। আসলে না আমার মনটা অনেক খারাপ।
চোখ বন্ধ করেন।
আমি বুঝি না ভাই, তুই কি মানে তোর সমস্যা কি? তুই এনে কি করতেছিস? তোর কত সুন্দর একটা
আমার কাছে ছিল বুঝছো, আমার কাছে 20,000 টাকা ছিল, তো সকালবেলা যখন আসছিলাম না একটা গরিব
না, আমার ভাবতেও লজ্জা লাগতেছে, মানে সামান্য কটা টাকার জন্য তুমি এইভাবে আমাকে বারবার।
তোমার এখন বর্তমান প্ল্যান কি তাইলে?
আমার প্ল্যান হচ্ছে